Okay, as promised, here I am answering questions from my subscribers. Now, on to Dexmosis. He is a lot nastier than Tonios. He made me work for his answer. He asked if I know whether or not the Black Athena is accurate or not. First, there's something important I have to say. Damn you, Dexmosis. Damn you. Why couldn't you just ask me for the color of my underwear? Anyway, I could have just answered I don't know, would have been true enough, and go on to the next question. But Dexmosis piqued my curiosity, so I had to go back to my old journalistic roots and start reading on the topic. So, The Black Athena, written by Martin Bernal, is a very controversial three-volume work about the possible Afro-Asiatic roots of the Greek civilization. Not being an expert in classical civilization, but my wife, on the other hand, is. That's what she studied back in university. Um, I wouldn't dare to say whether this theory is right or wrong. But my wife, on the other hand, totally disagrees with the Black Athena, and I wouldn't dare disagree with my wife, right? But from my point of view, as someone who has studied linguistics, I'm kind of iffy about the idea that the author would attempt to tread into the linguistic field while he is not an expert in the domain. To be able to study properly the roots of such ancient languages, you need an in depth knowledge that I believe he may not have. He did study the language and history of China, but that doesn't make him an expert in Indo European languages. It sounds to me like he's trying to get into the trend of Africanization of civilization that is fairly common among some people in the United States. They are mostly famous for trying to say that the Egyptian pharaohs were Africans, including Cleopatra. Well, when you look at ancient Egyptian illustrations, you can tell that they weren't colorblind. It's easy to differentiate the Nubians from the white skinned Egyptians. However, it is true that some pharaohs were Nubians because Egypt was indeed conquered by some northern African nations. But Egypt was also conquered by the Greeks, and the Ptolemy pharaohs were in fact Greeks. The first Ptolemy was a Greek general, and since they were inbred, because that's all they married, each other's relatives, the Ptolemies were all Greeks. Now, on to Tiberian Horde, who wants to know if I'm less an American than he is in his corner of Texas. Well, Tiberian Horde, it all depends on how you want to define American. If you mean United Statians, no, I'm not a United Statian. But if you define an American as someone who lives on one of the American continents, well, yes, I am very much an American. However, since I live next door to Buffalo and Detroit, and since Canada is the US's biggest trading partner, life here is like sleeping next to an elephant. It just cannot be ignored. Also, being a citizen of the world and a humanist, I feel concerned by anything that happens to people anywhere, whether they live in Canada, the United States, South America, Europe, Asia, Australia. Well, you know what I mean. And finally, on to Gokster, who decided to test my knowledge of arithmetics. He wants to know how much peanut butter fits into a tennis ball and how many parrots are needed to lift an elephant. But first, a word from our advertiser. Picky pickle people pick Peter Pan peanut butter. Skippy. Skippy. Oops. Never mind. Well, I have known Gokster longer than he realizes, and I know he was asked the same question when he celebrated his 500th subscription. And I must say that he approached both problems in a completely wrong way, especially when it came to the peanut butter. He tried to figure out the weight of the peanut butter necessary to fill up a tennis ball. That's wrong. That's totally wrong, Gokster. You should have considered that there are many kinds of peanut butter. Like this kind here is crunchy. It's got peanuts in it. It's not just peanut butter. You've got very crunchy, crunchy, smooth, and very smooth. Some brand names add more oil than others. They all have different recipes. So I'm very glad that he asked me this question because someone has to set you right, Gokster. And that person is me. M-E, me. So no, it's not the weight that is important, but the volume. That part never changes. Doesn't matter if it's... Oh, man, I'm working. I'm talking to people on the internet. Volume doesn't change. So, according to regulations, a tennis ball must be between 6.25 and 6.5 centimeters in diameter, and therefore has a radius of 3.125 to 3.285 centimeters. So, if we are to use an average of 3.2 centimeter radius, we end up with the following formula. 4 over 3 times pi times 3.2 times 3.2 times 3.2. And the result is around 137.258 cubic centimeters, depending on how far you want to go with the decimals of pi. So there you go, Gokster. Put that in your pipe. Oh, I forgot. You don't smoke the pipe. You smoke cigars and cigarettes. Well, if you ever roll up a cigarette, stuff that in there with the tobacco. And now to the question of the parrots lifting an elephant. Again, I have to set Gokster straight. He was right in asking himself what kind of parrot would be involved in the equation. However, he did not ask himself all the questions necessary when it came to the elephant. Like, was it an Indian or an African elephant? I guess that's because he has spent too much time in Africa and thinks everything has to be African. So, first I want to pick an elephant. And I choose an African male elephant just to please Gokster. That should be the biggest type we can find. According to Wikipedia, the largest elephant ever recorded weighed 24,000 pounds. So if you take 24,000 and divide it by 2.2046, that gives us 10,886.3286 kilos for our European friends and also the Canadians like me. Now, I have to pick a parrot. My personal preference goes towards the Norwegian blue. Beautiful plumage, you know. However, some pet shops have a nasty habit of selling dead ones that they nail to the perch of their cage. I'm told it is quite common in England. So, Norwegian blue basically comes in two varieties, live ones and those that are demised. Furthermore, they'd have difficulty getting a good hold of the elephant. The poor thing would end up with horribly deep scratches all over its body. That makes for a rather nasty business, and I'm not interested in that kind of stuff. So I decided to go for a totally different type of parrot. I picked Boeing Material Handling Corporation's Parrot model HR800BC. It is a high-rise drum handler used to move drums to and from pallets, skids, and scales. Each parrot can lift up to 800 pounds. So, If we were to attach handles all over the elephant, 30 pair at HR 800 BC should be enough to lift the animal. And with that, I bid you all a goodbye.
This has been an Obnoxious Cat production. I love that cat.